This panel is going to be on business globalization in India. We're going to follow the same format as the last panel, and we're going to have three panelists say a few opening remarks, and then we will open the session to questions. As you all know, in spite of the enthusiasm that Ambassador Mulroney exhibited earlier, India and China are probably the biggest and largest and perhaps at this point, in my opinion, the most dynamic of the countries out there. And so you cannot talk about globalization without really including these two countries. And so you're going to have a panel on China soon following this. I should tell you that the Smith School of Business, we are pretty much engaged with China in a big way. We have everything from executive programs to MBA programs to business plan competitions and so on and so forth. But I'm very interested in listening to the panelists because we are not as engaged in India. So with that, let me turn it over and we'll go in the order in which they're sitting from my left onwards. And let me call upon Gary Loveland. I guess you're an alumnus of Mason, yes, right? I am. 1984. He's head of IT security practice for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was talking to him at dinner yesterday, and has a wide experience all over the world, not just confined to India. So please, why don't you go ahead and say a few words, and we'll go on to the next panelist after that.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish many years ago when I was at Mason they had nice facilities like this. It's amazing every time I come back to see the growth and expansion here. So very proud to be here. From my perspective, again, quick introduction, I serve as a technology consulting partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I mentioned my major focus is in the area of information security. So, I think through the prior conversations you heard a lot about security of the borders. That's more physical security. I focus more on the logical security, which doesn't seem to know borders. So the countries from that perspective don't mean a lot. But that said, we are doing a lot in India, so I want to focus on three sort of lessons learned that I've had over the last 4 or 5 years as we've seen the expansion in India. The first, from a global member firm, PwC India is not new. We actually have a 130-year history there. It's actually one of the oldest firms within PwC. We're in nine cities there of about 6,500 employees. So from an employee perspective, we work a lot with India, and probably the first big driver from a lesson learned that we've seen is as our clients have expanded in India, we've had to expand in India. From a PwC perspective, one of the long lessons learned there is you need to immerse yourself in the culture. It's nice to sit over here and say, oh, we're learning about it. So one of the things that I've had to support from my leadership perspective is what we call tours of duty. That's a long-standing practice within the firm where we take people from different countries and we swap them. So that's something we definitely have accelerated from a U.S. and India perspective. So we have people that come over here. Most tour of duties are usually 18 to 24 months, so it's meant to be go over there, learn about the process, learn about what's happening, and then go back and share that knowledge. So that's something that I've been a supporter of. It definitely is an investment from a firm perspective. You have to take some of your best and brightest resources and, quite frankly, take that hit of taking them off your current projects and your current activities, ship them over there, but you get that long-term value when they come back. You also get the value of expanding your networks. So you start to have people that go across the borders, they come back and they share those networks that become long-term friends and networks as they grow up within the firm. So first and foremost, continuing to support that tour of duty, we've definitely seen that expand from an India perspective, the amount of people that we have sort of over there. So it's not like an expatriate go over there, work for a long time. It's very much is go there for a short period of time, and it's a continuous process. We are constantly swapping people in and out as a way to build that practice. And that's something we've definitely done from technology consulting. Historically, the firm's done a lot of that from audit and tax, as we've seen a lot of our clients start to build technology centers over in India and or offshore that to other service providers. From an Indian perspective, it's definitely increased the amount of effort that we've had to put in that area. Second big point is something that we're doing within the firm. As a technology consulting firm, we actually have service delivery centers over in India. And as you can imagine with that, starting to work together and interact has been a key component of our practice, and quite frankly has been mandated from our clients. They're expecting us to be able to provide services on a global basis. And as normally as you expect, we put a lot of effort in, again, getting the leadership teams from the India side and from the US side to work together. One of the big lessons learned that we found out, though, was we needed to drive that down to the lower levels, really making sure that the teams at the lower levels are working together and understand how to do that. And a good lesson learned, an example that we've done to that is, for my hiring processes, we do a lot of campus hiring, people right off of school, and we send them through a boot camp to get that. In the last 2 years, one of the things that we've done is actually start to invite resources, from India over. They come over to the U.S. and actually attend my U.S. training. So it gets twofold. You're developing that training of making sure that people are following the same process, getting the same level of training, but also what you're starting to see develop is at that lower level, those networks. So those people go to the same training, they graduate together. So as they start to grow their careers within PwC, it's become more common for them. That becomes normal from day one, not something, oh, Gary, you've been a partner for 12, 13 years, you need to start doing that now. It's really the entry-level associates are starting that process of working together and having that global network, specifically with India. So having that process has been very effective for us. The last lesson learned that we've had, because again, we're working on large-scale technology projects. Again, historically, you grew up in the different silos, and we've taken much more of a one-group approach, where it used to be their team and our team. Now we've sort of really evolved all of our systems, our processes, most importantly, our HR systems, because we are a people business at the end of the day, to make sure that we don't have those distinctions. So when we talk about staffing projects, talk about availability, who's going to work on a job and things like that, we're looking at that as a one-team approach, not something where it's a fix or just reach out and say, oh, we need an extra person. We actually start from day one when we're putting together budgets, jobs, bidding on proposals, working with our India team as a cohesive unit is a standard process now, not a one-off approach. So those are the 3 lessons learned that I've had, and definitely the growth that we're seeing from an India perspective, and quite frankly, the demand that clients are asking us to be able to provide those services are the key drivers.
I'm going to just, okay, maybe I should stand for you too. Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Thanks. Thank you. The next panelist is Rhonda Terry, and she's also an alum. So, I should commend George Mason. You have some fantastic alums sitting on the panel today. She's Vice President of Global Enterprise Services at Hewlett Packard. We sat next to each other at dinner yesterday, and India is just a small part. She's really a global citizen. I think of myself as a global citizen, actually. I was born in England, and so on and so forth. But anyway, the thing is, she is more of a global citizen than almost anybody I've met. She has had a very interesting career in telecommunications, services, as well as the financial industry. And so, please, Rhonda, we are looking forward to your comments on India.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for having me, Jorge. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be back here on campus. I can't say enough. And before I get started, I wanted to liven this up a little, make it bi-directional to all the cultures that we have in here. How many have actually been to India? Oh, not as many as I thought. How many of you want to see the Taj Mahal? Everyone always thinks about the Taj Mahal, okay? It's very interesting when you hear the word India, how eyebrows are raised or what they think about. And a couple things that I just want to start out with. My overall philosophy is there's no line on the globe other than the equator. We're talking about globalization here, and I think it's very important that we all understand that no matter what country we're speaking about. So thank you, Doctor. I have lived around several countries, and I'm here to speak about India, so I'm going to tailor it to my India experiences here. And India, wow, very insightful with building operations over there. So I was actually one of the senior execs at one of the largest financial institutions 11, 12 years ago, to go over to India and start up their operation 24/7 and some help desk operations with 2 people. So what does that mean, and how did that happen, and how did I learn from that global experience? The Leela Palace, which is a hotel there, was my residence. And I was traveling all over the world. Like Gary said, it was very, very important to embed in the culture. Do not underestimate the culture there. It is fabulous, okay? There's a lot of undercurrent things in India on how you engage personally with them, how they are hierarchical, what they want in their overall work environment, what makes those folks tick, are a lot different even in Bangalore versus Mumbai a lot of times doing culture, just like Hong Kong versus Singapore. I hate the word versus, but it's very different on how people do business, and you need to understand that culture. So what were my lessons learned in the approach that we actually took in a financial world? Interviewing folks from Wipro, Tata, HCL. These are the big companies over there, actually learning from them to start from the scratch. There's a big perception when folks hear the word, I am offshoring or best-shoring. Has anyone ever heard that? We got to stop that in a global environment. When my team says that, I say, stop right there. We're not just offshoring and best-shoring because it's a lower paid labor. I will consider a success when folks stop that language in the industry. So it's one thing that really, really heavily promoting that, and you have to learn that being over there. You'll also hear the perception of Indians when you're starting up over there that they'll job hop. Retention's very hard. They'll go down the road and get another job, but guess what? Americans do that too, right? It's very interesting, the dynamics of the culture. So the lessons learned over there were twofold. You need to understand, if you haven't been to India or any folks, and the ambassador spoke about it, he alluded to, pick up the newspaper, understand political. Understand what's going on in that environment. I've seen people go over in business that we were trying to bring over, and they actually offended the culture over there for how they acted. You cannot manage behind your desk and be in a global organization, no matter what country you're talking about, but it's very important to embed yourself in the culture. When I first got this invitation, I thought to myself, I should come dressed with a sare. And I did that in India about 2 months ago, and it hit the presses, but it was very interesting. Does anyone know what a sare here is? See, this is about learning the culture, embedding yourself in it, and you know what? It's interesting. Just how we respect it in different cultures, that culture will respond to that. We're only human. We learned to deal with that. Gary spoke about rotation of people. That was a clear thing. 2 years, sign up for that in the culture, and then you would move to another country. That's what the executives did. It's very important to have that from a global perspective. We also learned infrastructure buildup. 12 years in the financial world learning on that is very different when I was there just a couple weeks ago on how this country, I tend to go back there every couple of months, to be honest. And it's very different on the infrastructure's built up, what is new on the business, what's going on in the culture. We were talking at dinner last night, Doctor and I, about why do you think Walmart is not in India yet? You need to understand this when dealing with India. They have not broken through that. They will soon, but partnerships are key there. It's very interesting, that culture, when you go down and you've been in a tuk-tuk. Does anyone know what a tuk-tuk is? Again, trying, how you get around. Little three-wheeler, it's very interesting, that culture. When you go down, there's all these local businesses. The culture's embedded in, if this business comes into here, I will put that, mom and pop shop out of work. The people are very underlying current, and don't underestimate that. Really don't in that culture. We learned a lot as far as retention, what people wanted there when we were putting our operations in there. And the biggest thing that I can tell you is the folks in India, they want to do a good job. They're so loyal. They're very hierarchical. They want to know their next career progression. You need to lay that out or you will lose them. They want to know that very hands down. And also from a technology perspective, fact, opinion, and perception, understand the facts because it has grown. And I often hear about a negative tone about India. And it's just very interesting to see what folks think of India, so I appreciate your overall comments. In addition, think global but act local. Seems pretty easy when you talk about think global, act local. That's where you are. Take the blinders off. We learned that within India because even though the time differences are so well spread around the world, you need to understand India is at the hub like London. Talk a little bit about that later, and the time differences and how you apply that. Someone said India grows at night. What was that comment earlier? I wrote that down. I was very insightful to that. But these folks work 24/7, more so than another culture. So you really need to understand the culture here. And I hopefully you will go see that Taj Mahal. Those folks that you raised your hand. But lessons learned there. The challenges with the culture was a great experience, and it has grown. India has, and I think each of you should just keep an eye on India. Fact, opinion, or perception, whether you like it or not, like China, things are growing over there rapidly, more rapidly than what people think. And look for Walmart over there one of these days.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you.
Okay, our last panelist is Amitava Dutta, who is the Leroy Eakin Endowed Chair, Professor at the School of Management at George Mason University. Amitava.
Thanks, Anand. First of all, as a Mason faculty member, it's an absolute delight to be joined on the panel with two Mason alums. Also, having two distinguished industry leaders on the panel, and being an academic myself, it would be imprudent of me to tell you how to do business in India. They do it on a daily basis, I don't. However, I want to take this opportunity, having such a captive audience, to draw your attention to what I think is a major business opportunity that has not received the attention that I think it ought to receive. This opportunity has arisen because of the forces of globalization, and the solution will come from that too. And the sector that I'm referring to is the business of education. Okay? Very often, if you read the press, you would think that every second person in India is either a programmer or a call center operator. And that's simply not the case. There are other business opportunities there as well. As I was telling somebody else a little while ago, when you have a country of over 1 billion people that has only recently woken up to its possibilities, there will be a demand for everything from soap to Harley-Davidsons. So there are lots of opportunities. The issue is not whether there are opportunities. The issue is whether can you execute, can you take advantage of those opportunities. It's the execution that's the problem. Okay, that's the issue rather you face. So I want to focus on one particular segment that's of specific interest to me, and that's the business of education. Just some statistics. The literacy rate has gone up, certainly since independence, but still right now it's around 70%, let's say 30% illiteracy, all right? But if you take that further, if you go beyond just literacy, for college, the current college capacity in India meets only 7% of the eligible college population. So you can just imagine the demand for it. And if you think about how India's economy has taken off recently, it has mostly been in the service sector. Okay? Now, in order for the service sector to flourish, you need a steady supply of human capital, qualified people. And there is ample evidence that India is gradually or fairly quickly eroding its price advantage that it had, okay? And the major reason for that is that the supply of qualified people is not as large as you would like, okay? You often hear numbers like India graduates 500,000 engineers a year. What they don't tell you is half of them are unemployable because they don't know their stuff as well as they should. The other half need to get trained as soon as they get hired. So there are certainly quality issues, certain measurements, there are some metrics which say that half of college professors don't have a master's or a PhD degree, all right? So there's a very strong need for education from the primary levels all the way up to higher education. Now, primary education is seen more as a public good, so there will be more government involvement in the delivery of primary education. But I suspect in higher education that is seen more as a private consumption item where the government is more willing to take a little more hands-off attitude. And this meeting the education needs simply will not be done by government alone. Private sector has to play a role, and that is where I think the business opportunity arises. Now, the American education system, particularly the higher education system, is the envy of the world. People don't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to do graduate studies, let me go to Lebanon. Okay? They'll decide to come here, by and large. So the United States has an excellent track record in providing higher education as a product. Okay? And given that that market is over there, that huge market, untapped market, I think it's one that should be looked at more seriously as a business opportunity, not just as a do-good that just go and teach people, because certainly government by itself will not be able to do it. Now, in order to do that, I think one caution that we need to exercise is that we cannot simply take solutions from here and transplant them over there. That is what many businesses do as a start, as an entry. If you take consumer goods, you take the same packaged goods here and sell them over there, simply because when you have 1 million people, there will be a small segment of that population that resembles consumers over here. So there is a reasonable number of consumers that you can sell these products to. But if you want to reach the larger market, if you want to tap the larger business opportunity, the solutions have to be tailored to that particular environment, meaning the product, being education, has to be tailored to that specific circumstances over there, which means designing content that is specifically relevant to the Indian context. But I think that possibility is there. There's money to be made there. Also, if you think about the demographics and the geography of the country, where only 30% of the population is in urban centers, 70% is rural, technology will have to play a major role in both the generation of content as well as in the delivery of content. Faculty are in short supply. If you want to amplify the impact of good faculty and reach a larger percentage of the population in terms of delivery of education, technology has to play a very important role. And there again, there's money to be made. Okay, so I would urge everyone here to think of education as a business sector, think of the business of education, and do good while doing good for yourself.
Thank you. Before I throw this open to the public, I'm going to take the privilege of being the chair of this session to ask a few questions myself. I know all of you have spoken in terms of the larger picture, but perhaps I can ask you to focus your mind a little bit and talk to us about perhaps and you can go in any order that you like. What do you consider now? Keeping in mind that there is not a lot of sensitivities of if you say things that are controversial, right? Because we need to be a little controversial sometimes. What are the you consider to be, say, the 2 or 3 real challenges of doing business in India, and also maybe 2 or 3 opportunities that people may not have thought of. So, of course, education, we were told, is one of those things. But if you can think about something else that may come up. So, if you can start with the challenges first, and I'm sure Amitava, who spoke about education, will also tell us a little bit about the challenges of doing that. But let me ask the 2 on my immediate left to start the answer.
Challenges, yeah, a lot of them. I'm trying to pick one.
Well, what comes at the top of your mind? What is the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge I've seen, probably living day in, day out, is just dealing with, and I think the Prime Minister mentioned this, and I think I hit it a lot, but just the different rules and regulations. So again, we talk a lot of, from a technology perspective, a lot of laws, compliance issues, and rules are written based on borders, right? What happens inside of India versus outside, quite frankly, from the U.S. perspective. And so I think from my day in and day out life, that's probably one of the biggest challenges, where there's a mutual desire to perform an activity, to do an engagement, but what's getting in the way is the ability to actually leverage what you've built, to leverage the global network because of some laws or compliance issues. And so we spend a lot of time, both internally as a firm, working with our clients and their general counsel, as well as our counterparts in India, just going through arranging projects to meet compliance requirements more so than to meet the business requirement. So I think that's something, again, within the firm, from influencing Capitol Hill and things like that. We spend a lot of time, I think there's a lot of rules that are there for good places, but there's a lot of them that were written in the out of date, and because they're based on a border issue that really just doesn't exist or doesn't really come into play when you're looking at it from a technology perspective.
All right, maybe another.
I would say that on top of the data privacy issues, also keeping things evergreen to make it global, from your processes or technology. I think that's a big challenge from an opportunity. What I mean by evergreen is keeping it up to date. That's very important across the globe. Also, as far as what I deal with day to day across my desk is the perception of you cannot hire in India because they'll leave in 3 months. And you need to have a bench strength with all Wipro or HCL, all these other contractor firms to build that up. That's a big deal on what we deal with retention and how people manage. I would say an opportunity, though, like Professor said, education, larger franchises to make sure, helping India also bring in other companies from around the world. I think that's an opportunity bi-directional. So it's not siloed that we can, and I'm not talking about Walmart, fashion. There's stuff there that we could do to help them bi-directionally. I think it's interesting. It's a big opportunity there.
Again, if I think of the education sector, as I said, it's the execution that we have to focus on. The opportunity is there. I think one of the biggest challenges there is political, meaning what are the rules of the game? If you're going to get the private sector involved, then the proper role of government is to set up the rules of the game, and that the people will play by those rules. And India is the world's largest democracy, and as someone once said, democracy is the worst form of government, with the exception of all others. So there are advantages certainly to the democracy, there are disadvantages. And as you may have seen, in India, the government is often a coalition of several political parties. When you have a coalition of several political parties, then often small parties have a disproportionate influence on the outcome and the way things happen. So if you look at the history over the last 3 decades, and the policies and the rules of the game, as it were, as they have been in place, they tend to oscillate between Mao and Darwin, in the sense that at one extreme you have the government saying, we know what's good for the people, we'll tell you how to run your business and constrain you in every possible way. At the other end is a dog-eat-dog kind of, let everybody loose and let 1,000 flowers bloom. So that's a certain degree of instability that doesn't lend itself very well to long-term activities. But that's, again, certainly a major challenge to keep in mind. What are the rules of the game? How stable are they? And how would you navigate those? Because education is a long-term affair. You don't get in and get out in a few years.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are pretty illuminating. I mean, one other question from me, and then we'll move to the audience. So we do hear a lot. In fact, next Friday, believe it or not, the Smith School has a big event on emerging markets, and the speaker there is going to be Tarun Khanna, who's the professor at Harvard, and he has written a book about the emerging multinationals from India. Okay, so I'm also wondering, and again, certainly because you work at Pricewaterhouse and HP, how much competition do you find locally? So when you're trying to do something there as a multinational company that is, let's say, located, or at least pay taxes in the United States, or not maybe, but that when you go into a country like India, I mean, how much competition is there really, and how do you deal with that kind of competition locally? Maybe I can move that on to to you.
Yeah, I think that's been interesting, and I think from a PwC perspective is a bit different. As I mentioned, you know, we've been operating in India for 130 years.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, from that perspective, we are the local competition to a great extent. So it's not like a market per se that as a member firm we're trying to get into. So I think from that perspective, the competitive pressures have not been as great. But what we get asked is, I think maybe it's a higher expectation of being a global firm. There's a higher expectation from the local companies there. So where we struggle internally is, again, the ability to leverage that global network, where they want to make sure that we have the knowledge sharing, the communications, the contractual mechanisms in place to actually deliver those services, not just within India, but to India clients outside the U.S., outside of India.
Okay.
A lot of competition, don't underestimate it. People are building up buildings right next to each other. You can literally walk from myself to, you know, not even 10 steps on some of these corridors. And the companies themselves, and I'm not just talking about, you know, JP Morgan or a Barclays right next to each other that are global, financial and services, Cisco, IBM, and there's so many, they're right there in the corridor. So much competition, they want the same real estate, how much square footage, I mean, we're up against all the different things, don't underestimate it. It's actually a great study to do, and that's from a company perspective. And I mentioned people earlier, because people are number one, that's your intellectual capital, I always come back to that common denominator, that they have heavy competition, and it's very, very, don't underestimate it there. They're right there, and for those folks that have not seen India, everything is stacked on different corridors. You can walk right over there and get a job offer that day. There's lines out of the building for open recruiting that you won't see that here in America. It's very different, so don't underestimate the competition over there.
Well, education is a distinctive line of business in the sense that competitive forces, primary education, if it's declared in the Constitution as a universal right, then government will play a very major role in its delivery. Okay? So the forces of competition, how they play out in the education sector, are not quite the same as how they play out in some of the other sectors. My sense is that in higher education, it's a much more competitive environment. The barriers to entry are lower, whereas for primary and secondary education, it's a much more regulated environment. So the forces of competition will play out differently and at a different level. But there certainly will be forces. There are good schools, good entities, or academic institutions in India, not enough of them. You constantly hear about 10 or 20 very good institutions, and then the quality falls off rather rapidly after that. So there is a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity, and I don't sense a major major competitors, at least at the higher education level. So there's certainly a lot of room for entry from abroad in terms of providing higher education.
Okay, maybe we will open it out to the audience. Yeah, question out there. Yes, yes, sir. Please tell us who you are, and then. Sure. Okay.
I was looking at the World Bank's Doing Business report from 2010, and I see that India is ranked 169th in the world in terms of its ease of doing business, about almost 10 places below Indonesia, where I've worked, which can be very untransparent and difficult to understand. And I also see that India ranks 182nd, almost a full 20 points lower in terms of the ease and ability to enforce contracts. So I was wondering, from the perspective of doing business in India, if you're not an Indian firm, is it right to think that India may actually be two economies? Obviously, within the individual states, there will be different economies, but in terms of there being large businesses in India that are familiar with practices in the international context, and then everybody else.
I'll go first. Yeah, again, I think that's well, we might have a different experiences. Again, just the way PwC is organized as a global firm, it's actually individual firms in each country. So from that perspective, PwC India is its own firm that rolls up to PwC Global as part of the member firm. So from that perspective, we do business in India, have been doing business in India. So I think we have the, I guess I'll say the word luxury of having been there and having figured that out. On the other side of that, in my role, I work, my clients who are building operations over there, I would say, yes, they've gone through that struggles, and I would say that's one of the limiting factors. And Rhonda, you said, the focus on like call centers and operations, I think they focused on those because a model has been developed and it's repeatable, and you can build that, but I have seen it limiting, and I agree with the comments that there's future potential there much beyond that, but those limits are there because of the contractual issues and the cultural issues. So I think as we look at that, I know at least internally we're having that debate, right? Because if you look at just the size and the growth, the market's got to be there. I think the same applies to China in the comments that were made on the earlier panel, that just because of the size and the growth, you can't ignore it. But I think, again, we have the luxury of having an internal global firm process that allows us, for our own businesses, to transcend that.
Well stated.
Yeah.
I think that's well stated.
Yeah. I think the comment contained within your question, I think, is well-founded. There could well be 2 or 3 Indias in terms of how easy it is to do business there. There are some sensitivities with respect to specific industries, and in those cases, things take a long time to get developed. On the other hand, there are much less sensitivities related to other businesses. So, to give you a personal experience, I mean, I set up I would say, an energy environment consulting firm in India. Hardly took any time. The processes are very clear. You go through a registration process, you get a tax number, and like you do business in Philadelphia, you're up and running about the same time it took for me to set up something in Philadelphia. On the other hand, if you come in with something to do with nuclear, it may take you 20 years, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know what went into that an analysis that ranks India 160, but it may be that if you put everything in together, that if they do it the way you kind of implied, two sets of groups, then perhaps there'll be a group where things are much easier, and then some places where things are very difficult. Education, by the way, in spite of what you're saying, Amitava, is a very difficult place to establish a business, because both philosophically and through practice, there are the Indian civil service has very strong opinions on what is education and whether or not you can make money through education. You know what I'm saying? They don't understand that you can make money by educating people. So I think there are some, so India has come a long way in the last 2 or 3 years in setting up new laws that encourages foreign direct investment in education. However, if you read the small print, right, so the word contract enforcement is a loaded word, so it's okay, you can use that. But if you read the small print, then you realize that things are not as nice as it seems to be, right? Because, I mean, again, we've gone through the process of trying to figure out how to establish an educational institution in India. So good comment.
Sector by sector.
It's not so much sector by sector. It's a little more complex than that, but it's a very good question, and thank you for it. Yeah. Yes.
We talked about things going from here to India. What I'd like to hear about, if there are practices in India that are permeating back here to the Western world. For example, in the book India Way, which was written by, I understand, 4 Wharton professors, they talk about the distinct Indian ways of management. A couple of things they talk about is jugaad, which translates into improvisation. And another one was much more emphasis on corporate social responsibility. So do you guys see some of those practices coming back in a reverse trend here?
I do. I wouldn't say 100%, but I do see it as shifting back, especially as we've been more cognizant on bringing the culture, putting folks from India to London, not just all the to America. It's been interesting to see folks, and actually I'm relocating someone right now from who is Indian. He was in Malaysia for a while, and I'm putting him outside of London. And the reason why we're doing that is for some of those reasons. So I do see it coming bi-directional. It's a pull right now. I like it better when it's more balanced.
Yeah, I would agree. I haven't seen it become balanced. There's individual examples and good examples of that, but I haven't seen it as a balanced effort yet. I would like to see that. Again, from a PwC perspective, that's a big push. From a consulting perspective, being a consultant, you have to have well-defined methodologies and things like that, at least the allure of well-defined methodologies. And we recently went through a process, global, we call, everybody like, the cool word nowadays is transformation, so we came up with our transform methodology, and as part of that, we actually, because of the trends that we're seeing in globalization and best with the focus on India, we put special emphasis on making sure that we had their subject matter experts as part of that. So I think, I definitely had firsthand experience of that. As I look at my client base, do I see it like, 50-50 at this point? No, it's still more some good examples out there.
Next question. Go ahead.
If there's globalization and we're opening activities in other countries, does that mean that people who are native to those countries eventually can come and be part of the corporate structure of our American corporations? Is that the ultimate goal?
Yes.
I mean, some companies do that. Coca-Cola does it, so on and so forth.
We encourage it. We encourage it. It is the goal, absolutely. And I think it's great to have that diversification from thought processes and different cultures, because that makes the innovation even better.
Yeah, and I think it's similar within PwC, again, the way that we're organized for the global firm, we actually have, I'll say, internal mandate to ensure that we get that sort of cross-cultural, cross-country activity on there. So I think at the highest level, we have that. I think, as I mentioned earlier in my opening statement, our biggest focus is to drive that down to the lower levels. Again, getting that, starting to build it now, so it'll evolve over time versus trying to, I'll say, retrofit it at this point. And I think that's been our biggest focus, is getting those teams to start working together. Again, big focus right now on India, but I expect as we do that, I've already seen, again, across our PwC community, I'm getting requests from Spain, Nigeria, Australia, to get involved with that same type of training process as we start to see the value of that low-level networking as well.
I mean, just to, both those questions are interrelated. I mean, what we are certainly seeing, if you look at the CEO levels of the global, let's say, Fortune 1000 companies, that you see CEOs moving from country to country to run organizations. The head of HP, for example, is from Germany, right? And so on. So we do see that that there is this globalization at the highest level. It has permeated very little bit into a place like India. We don't really see an Indian CEO who runs, although, I mean, if you think of Jaguar and Land Rover, that's another conversation. What is happening, though, is that a lot of international firms are going and hiring management students from Indian business schools, right? So you're going to find the second and third layer of managers in global companies. I mean, companies, the United States hasn't done it yet, but if you go to European companies, you go to Singaporean companies, Chinese companies, they are hiring students from the Indian business schools, and you're going to find it going up little by little. So, I mean, we are in a mix, right? And what I say about India probably is true about South America. Perhaps will become true at some point about China. China is a little bit further behind in this. Anyway, with that as the last word, if you guys don't mind, I want to thank the panel one more time for a very illuminating. thank all of you for being an engaged audience. I do look at all of you, and you're all awake, so which is very good. So thank you very much.